Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever. Whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.
There's been a lot going on in the political arena lately. The Republican field of candidates vying for the nation's highest elected office stands at 12. Meanwhile, the man leading the pack, former President Donald Trump, and 18 others have been indicted for attempting to overturn the 2020 election. President Joe Biden's age is a constant topic of discussion, and now Dr. Cornel West has thrown his hat into the ring as a Green Party candidate. What does it all mean? And what else can we expect to see in the coming months? Dr. Eric Claville, the great prognosticator, is here to share his insight about the current political climate. So get ready for an engaging conversation on today's Another View. It all happens right after this national, regional, and local news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Another View producer Lisa Godley, in for Barbara Ham-Lee, who was recently named to the Virginia Humanities Board and today is attending her very first meeting. We wish her the best. Now, if you've been watching the news, you know that there's a whole lot going on as America counts down to the 2024 presidential election. Donald Trump, the frontrunner for the Republican Party, is facing more than 90 criminal charges in 4 different cases. Meanwhile, 11 other Republican candidates are hoping to convince voters that they're the man or the woman for the job. On the Democratic side, the issue of Joe Biden's age keeps rising to the surface. Meanwhile, Dr. Cornel West has thrown his hat into the ring as a Green Party candidate. Now, if you're wondering how all this will play out in 2024 or even over the next few months, you're not alone. And joining me here in the studio is the man with the answers. Dr. Eric Claville is here with his award-winning Claville Report. Eric, welcome, and thank you so much for being a part of today's broadcast.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Glad you're here. Now, if you have questions or thoughts, give us a call at 1-800-940-2240 or 757-440-2665. Now, Eric, as I look around, I'm just constantly seeing polls coming out. You know, they tell us not to put a whole lot of weight into polls, but the latest one from CNN, with 14 months to go before the 2024 election, Donald Trump is in the lead, 47%, Joe Biden 46%, and there are a lot of voters out there who don't like either candidate.
Absolutely.
Help.
Right.
Talk to us.
Well, you know, one thing about it, numbers don't lie, right? And those are the numbers. And it clearly shows that the former president, well, before we even get to the numbers of 47 and 46%, head to head with the current president, let's take a look at what's happening with the nomination. For the most part, the former president is the foregone conclusion that he is the nominee for the Republican Party. Everybody else is really just playing, you know, for second place, whatever that may be, in the big scheme of things. Right now, he enjoys over 50% support from Republican voters. One poll I saw was 65%. Many individuals on that stage of the first debate said, yes, we will support the former president or whoever is the Republican nominee for the election. Several said they would not. You do have several individuals who are currently running for the nomination that are polling below 2-3% and the like. You really only have a couple of viable candidates or individuals seeking the nomination who are that may have a shot at something. Of course, current governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, the current uprising star, VV Ramaswamy.
Yeah.
He is also rising. And, of course, Senator Tim Scott is kind of right there. And then you have the former vice president and then Nikki Haley. But other than that, I mean, that's kind of where you are. So he is going to be the nominee unless there's something unforeseen that happens. And we'll talk about what could happen between March and the nomination process with these indictments and the trials. Now you have him in a head-to-head battle, right, with the current president. And right now, he does enjoy a statistical dead heat. And there are a lot of factors that would come into play that actually could deliver the White House back into his hands, whether it be voter apathy, whether it be the Democrats not overperforming again in key states. I mean, these are all things that could play a key part in his reelection.
Yeah, because a lot of polls show that the Democrats aren't as excited about Joe Biden as the Republicans are about Donald Trump. And that sounds like that could be a problem.
Absolutely. You know, the current incumbent or the president really sometimes, and to their detriment, they don't enjoy a lot of fanfare because you're doing the job. You know, you're rising and falling with things that happen throughout the day, throughout the month or week. You know, your popularity can rise and then something happens, it takes a nosedive. So it really depends on when these polls are also taken. But also, with this president, there were a lot of promises that were made, or say a few, for voters to get them to get out, or non-traditional voters to get them to perform. Younger voters, young professionals that were not made good upon, and that may also affect the actual voter turnout itself. You know, one of those things are student loans.
Student loans.
Student loan forgiveness. Yeah, I mean, think about it.
Right.
You know, they were talking about $10,000 in student loans, and unfortunately, it didn't happen. Now, some would say, hey, that wasn't the president. It was the Supreme Court. But it's also about process, right? When President Obama was sworn in, the first order of business he did was he signed the Lilly Ledbetter law. And then what happened was, he signed as soon as he got off stage. That's what happened. It became law. What President Biden could have done was sign an executive order to instruct the Secretary of Education to work with Congress to, have $10,000 of student loans paid back. I mean, that was a campaign promise. That was a major promise put on. So that way it would have taken it off of his shoulders and put it into Congress at that time that had at least some juice to actually do it. But it didn't happen. It just kept dragging out. So now you have a situation where, unfortunately, there's really nothing that could be done because of the Supreme Court ruling. Now, of course, you're going to go through the legal process and finding other ways. But for the most part, I mean, with student loans, the other part that people don't realize is that, a lot of money is made off of those through investments and so forth. So, it's kind of hard to get student loans wiped out or forgiven because of that. But that's another story for another day. It's a lot of twists and turns in that. But the simple answer is it's a very good investment for a lot of persons on Wall Street.
I'm thinking back years and years ago when you came in and you said that Donald Trump was going to win the nomination.
Yeah.
And we laughed at you.
Absolutely.
And then you came back and you said he was going to win the presidency. And we laughed at you. So we don't laugh anymore. But his supporters are saying, at least half of them, that they aren't concerned that his criminal charges will impact his run for the presidency. And they are still going to support him. What is the likelihood that we could see the president of the United States running the country from behind bars?
Well, I don't think so. Let's talk about these indictments first and see what we have. So basically, you have 4 indictments. These indictments are very serious. They are criminal indictments. You have 2 federal indictments, actually 3, and then you have 2 state and 2 federal. The 1 state and 1 federal are basically the same. It's for trying to overturn the election, interfering. 1 in Georgia, and of course 1 in D.C. You also have a federal indictment, basically for obstruction of justice and him basically keeping secret documents or documents that he should not have had, which we also saw the pictures of those in his resort. And then finally, you have the state court New York State Court indictment, which basically for criminal charges for hush money payments and also on basically financial issues, right? So when you take a look at all these together, we're not talking about a lot of time, behind bars if a person gets the full being jailed. However, there's a possibility that he will be found guilty of some of this, if not all of it. And if that's the case, then he end up, probably being sentenced. Maybe it depends on the judge, of course. It depends on the sentencing guidelines, but he may be able to have conditions, conditional release, and not actually serve time. But all of that is part of the legal process. But case in point is that the first trial is in March, I believe is scheduled. That doesn't include voir dire, that doesn't include motions that you'll have, that doesn't include the trial itself, and also one trial. I think Georgia, the judge is going to allow it to be televised. So this is going to be probably bigger than the OJ case, as far as being televised. So this is this is right in the middle of voting, heavy campaign season. So we could have the Republican nominee that's in a trial during heavy campaign season as well, right? So all this comes into play. Now, in the event that he is found guilty, in the event that he does win the election, will he be able to be behind bars and still become president? We've never seen this before, right? So
we haven't seen a lot of stuff that's going on before.
So these are all questions that we'll have to answer when we get there, but this is all speculation as well.
Wow. Okay. Do you see the independents coming back for Donald Trump this time?
Independent voters were very instrumental in getting him a few states, right, and really voting him into office. But it also was because of the candidate and the apathy of his opponent as well, Hillary Clinton. I do see that same apathy, and with the current president. And I also see voters not really taking a close look at this election and saying, hey, well, he's not going to win. So you may see some people that won't vote. You may see some people that don't want to vote. You may see individuals that say, I'm going to sit this out and vote for a third candidate because they're not happy without a candidate. I mean, there are polls that show that voters really aren't happy with these two candidates. Voters aren't happy with these two elderly candidates. They're just not happy at all. I mean, so that becomes a major issue as well, right? So you have to really ask yourself, what's really at play in each major state? Because at the end of the day, there's about 5 states that are going to elect a president. It's been done in the last 2 presidential cycles. Mm-hmm. So those 5 states will continue to come into play. So with those battleground states, Florida is definitely one of those battleground states. Pennsylvania is one of those battleground states. Michigan, Ohio, Virginia is also going to be one of those states, and then maybe Nevada as well as a 6th state. All the other states are pretty much, by their population and how they traditionally vote, pretty much solid, right? But you will have a few, and then Georgia has been that enigma in the last couple of cycles, right? So, when it comes down to it, how do you get those? What are those voters in those states are actually going to do?
Gotcha. Now, if you have questions or thoughts, please give us a call at 1-800-940-2240 or 757-440-2265. Eric, you mentioned that third party candidate, which is I'm gonna jump in with this whole Cornel West thing, Green Party candidate. He says he's running for truth and justice. He wants to reintroduce America to the best of itself. What will this do to Joe Biden's lead as a Democratic frontrunner?
Yeah, well, the same thing that happened with Ralph Nader and Al Gore. It's going to chip away, during that election period. And don't get me wrong, Cornel West is a known commodity amongst a certain group of individuals. I mean, he's known across the country. He has name recognition within the Democratic Party. He probably will have more success with progressives than anything, or newer voters, those independent voters that overperform for Joe Biden, say, hey, I don't want to do that again, and then vote for Cornel West. So I could see that. I could see him getting 1%, 2%, maybe 3%, but nothing more than that. However, in a race like this, that becomes very monumental.
Okay, well, there that goes. Joe Biden's age keeps popping up.
Right.
So, I mean, Donald Trump is what, maybe 3 years younger?
3 years younger. And it's interesting you mentioned that because, right. So it's 78 with Donald Trump, the new, 68 or 58, and it's 81, the new 91, with how people are responding to it. So being only 3 years apart age-wise, I mean, it's just very interesting to see how these individuals just really are looked upon. And of course, we know that Donald Trump is a personality. He's a TV personality, so he knows how to present himself. And of course, President Biden is not. But at the same time, when you look at the different mishaps that the president has had, of course he's always talked very low and very kind of monotone. So that doesn't play well either, in the public view. But at the end of the day, I mean, he's in great health. At the end of the day, he's doing the job of the president now. So I think that it's an unfair characterization, but at the same time, 81 is 81. And he's doing a lot. He's going a lot of places, seeing a lot of people, shaking a lot of different hands. And, health is very important. So if he continues to stay healthy and show that he's healthy, I don't think that's going to be an issue. But if there is a major medical episode between now and election time, I think that's going to be an issue.
Okay. Who do you think was the most convincing during the first Republican debate?
I think Ramaswamy had, he's introduced himself to the people, right? I think he is definitely a Trump disciple with a lot of his views and so forth. But I think he's a smart guy, business guy, made a lot of money and has ideas, right? So you get a lot of people like that do things like that. I mean, Mark Cuban was one, and made a lot of money, smart guy, had ideas, and he brought a team, and he's doing a lot of other great things. So you see a lot of people that enter politics or into business because of that, right? They are successful in one area, then they say, I have ideas, so I want to get my ideas out there. But I also think that Ron DeSantis kind of showed who he was. Ron DeSantis. He didn't mix things up. He didn't change anything, and he was what he was. He is what he is. So I don't think he did himself any favors, but I think he showed people that he is who he's going to be, and I think he's stagnated where he is. I think Chris Christie's trying to fight there.
His numbers are low. Yeah,
he's trying to fight to say I'm a fighter, but this is a time period, and I want our listeners to understand. This is a time period where we're polarized as a nation, and you have to pick sides. In politics now, it's about picking sides. That middle of the line, and we want to make America, principles and things of that nature. What Mike Pence is doing and all that doesn't play now. It did maybe 10 years ago, right? Not now. It's you got to be hardline. It's what side are you on, and it's just the state of our politics today. Of course, it goes in cycles, but that is the cycle where we are. What side are you on? And you got to be hard. And that's why Donald Trump is very popular, because he's speaking to he's taking a hard right on a lot of issues, and he speaks to the heart of a lot of people, especially in the Republican Party. I remember Senator Thune out of North Carolina. He was at the debate, and they were there. They had surrogates trying to convince voters, move past Trump, guys, move past Trump. But I think what they're missing is that's who their voters are. And instead of them moving past Trump, their voters are saying you need to move toward us and where we are and what we believe. And that's really where they are. So I think there is a lack of belief in accepting that that's who their voters are in that party. And there's also a lack of, I think, in the establishment where they don't really understand where the people are and what they're speaking on both sides. They want you to pick sides. They want you to do a hard line. But however, in the nature of politics, it's not about being stayed down and never moving. It's about compromise. Our nation was built on compromise. Politics is about compromise. You got to have compromise. and that's the only way you're going to be, successful in anything.
Okay. Who do you see are the leading candidates for Trump's VP? Should he take the nomination?
I think Ramaswamy is really vying for that. And I think if he continues to go and keep going in the lane he's in, I think he's a viable candidate to be that VP. That's the only person I really see that would even accept that he would choose. I think a lot of people run from that, for good reason, especially if you look at the history and of what his former vice president had to endure. I don't think anyone wants to go through that. But I think that that's probably what you're looking at. But also keep in mind, these are really trying times that our country has, right? So not just trying times internally, but externally. We haven't even talked about what took place. Remember what took place with Russia and election interference. Well, a story just released today where they noted where China is now using AI, artificial intelligence, and social media bots in order to influence voters, right? So at first it was just, social media and what the Russians were doing. But if you look at AI now, artificial intelligence, it is so sophisticated.
It's very sophisticated.
It's very hard to tell the reality, from what's real and what's not. It's extremely hard to the naked eye. I mean, you really have to delve down. How many people are scrolling through their social media saying, "Oh no, that's not that. No, this is AI." They're not doing that because it's fooling the naked eye, right? So I think that's one of the major issues that we have to really take into account of what is the factor that China is going to play in our election. And not only that, but on the world stage. I've mentioned before on previous shows that China itself has, they are vying for, the U.S. position, right? They are the number 2 competition in the world when it comes to economics, when it comes to military, when it comes to definitely the number 1 country seeking natural resources and making deals across the board with other countries for their natural resources. So, China is vying for that position that we're in, So the U.S. has been, the number 1 nation, the superpower for a very, very long time. We've enjoyed that for a long time. And, of course, with every superpower, you get challenged every now and then. So China is challenging us right now.
Now, the closest person to Trump right now is DeSantis.
Yes.
But his numbers have been falling.
Yeah.
And what's causing his campaign to falter? He won huge for re-election.
Yes,
for
in
governor,
Florida.
but
Right.
He's struggling. So what's the problem there?
He just doesn't translate well across the board. Again, it's about selling. Becoming president of the United States is really just it's a lot about being it's like a high school class president, race. You got to be likable across the board. It's about personality. And I just think he doesn't have personality that translates across the board to people. Also, voters don't want a president fighting culture wars. Republicans don't want their candidates fighting culture wars, which is interesting because a lot of the issues that the Supreme Court have ruled on this past session has been culture war issues. And they've ruled toward the Republican side of that, right? The extreme sides of that. If you look at this free speech with the Colorado issue, if you look at affirmative action as a factor, not in admissions in higher education, in other cases, I think they're settled. Those culture war issues are settled as far as that group goes. But I think the voters now are really looking at in America, the Republicans, that is, that are voting for Trump or supporting Trump, are really looking at America that's being sold to them that America can't go back to, and they're fighting a fight that can't be won. So, but he's a candidate that says, "Hey, I can do that," but it's absolutely can't. He just can't do it. He didn't do it when he was a president. He just can't do it now. But at the end of the day, when we take a look at the other candidates, Ron DeSantis is the closest, but I think Ramaswamy is probably the one that could overtake it in that popularity. But I don't think his numbers go anywhere. His lunch on Twitter was a major failure. I mean, that's just the best way to put it. It wasn't good at all. You had the new owner of Twitter on there with it, and it just couldn't launch. So I think that is a microcosm of his campaign of failure to launch, and it just didn't launch. So.
Gotcha. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the current political climate and what it all means for America with our favorite political analyst and creator of the Claville Report, Dr. Eric Claville. And joining us a little later on in the broadcast, author, professor, and filmmaker Booker T. Mattison. His brand new thriller, Twisted Marriage Therapist, just dropped today, and he'll be joining us in just a bit to tell us a little about it. Now, we'd love to hear from you, so pick up the phone, give us a call, 1-800-940-2240 or 757-440-2665. What's the likelihood that Barack and Michelle Obama will be major campaigners for Biden?
Yeah, campaigners, yeah, right. Now, there has been reports behind the scenes that the former president is not really happy with the current president and certain things and the way he's handling certain things. But at the end of the day, you're going to have conflict behind the scenes. Nobody's going to be perfect. Nobody's going to agree. Even best friends disagree, on the way things run. So it is what it is. But at the end of the day, when the candidates are solidified, and let me just be on record to say I do believe that the current president will be the nominee for the Democratic Party along with the current vice president. But when that's solidified, they will coalesce around that candidate. They will lobby and get their votes out. And I think at the end of the day, he will definitely be the candidate and everybody's going to support him. With that being said, it's 14 months away. What's going to happen in those 14 months economically, what's going to happen domestically, what's going to happen internationally, what's going to happen economically. So it's a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty that could arise in that time period.
Okay, speaking of the economy, economic fears seem to drive voters.
Absolutely.
The economy has somewhat recovered. Absolutely. Inflation is down. Why doesn't Biden seem to be getting the credit for that, or is he?
Well, it's one of those things where if things are going well, everybody else takes credit, you don't credit. But once it goes bad, it's 100% on you, right? And it's just the way it is. And I also, Congressman Scott made a statement one time, and it's kind of true across the board. Messaging. Democrats are not really good at messaging at what they do. Well, they do a lot of great things well for the public in general. When Republicans run up budgets, the Democrats come in and help balance the budget. And when they pass different bills and so forth, they pass those bills to benefit the working class, the union people, and so forth. A lot of bills that are passed on the Republican side are for big business, tax cuts and things of that nature. And again, for those of you that may disagree, just go back and look at the legislative history, go back and look at those policies. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, it's about messaging. And I think if the Democrats improve their messaging, they got to improve it. I think if they do that, they'll do a whole lot better across the board. They definitely can partner with a lot of the entertainment Hollywood executives to try to get messaging out, but they're just not as good at messaging what they do well. Republicans are good at messaging wedges, creating wedges, easily. That is something that goes back way back, in the '60s, pre-'60s. So they've only perfected it since then. So. Creating a wedge or fear as opposed to articulating the nuances of what was done that is good is always going to be a challenge for individuals to do.
Okay. Now, you've already said that you believe Biden's going to, he and Kamala will take the nomination and run with it. But let's just hypothetically say at the last minute he decides to step aside and not run. Who's waiting in the wings?
Well, of course, the natural segue is the current Vice President Harris. She's waiting in the wings. She's out, it was believed that she was the foregone, nominee for 2024 in some camps, but probably 2028, as well. So that would be the natural person to step up. Outside of her, there is not another person, that I think the Democrats have that could say this is who we're putting up, to be. Now, of course, Governor Gavin Newsom is one who is trying to make his name across the national stage. Of course, he does have a major state that he can do that with, but he doesn't really have that name recognition nationally just yet. But that's it. That's all you have. Even on the Republican side, I mean, you don't have anybody that's a viable alternative, to the current president. I mean, the current former president. I mean, who is that person? So I think at the end of the day, we're looking at a reckoning with both parties and identity. And we're also looking at the identity and the heartbeat of America, right? I think it was Mike Huckabee made a statement. He said, if Trump doesn't win, it's the last election that's decided by the ballot. The next one will be decided by bullets, and right. And, but, again, looking at the demographic and looking at the constituency, that supports the former president, looking at what took place at J6, who would have thought in our country in 2020 that we would have seen, average U.S. citizens, rally on a lie and literally break into the U.S. Capitol. I mean, that was still, when I look at clips from it, I'm still scratching my head saying, where did this take place? This was in our country that took place. So it's not so far-fetched that individuals would take that into their own hands. I mean, look at what is taking place with domestic terrorists in Jacksonville. That took place, the unfortunate killing that took place there, and others that have been thwarted because of the lie, right? So we're dealing with the identity of not just the two parties and the future leaders of those two parties, because this is it as far as the traditional leaders or the older leaders that we have. All right, they're all in their 70s and 80s. This is it. So who is that new crop of leaders that are going to step up? Who are they? We're going to find out 2025 who they are. Now, also, those new leaders are going to help to dictate who the heartbeat and the direction of our country moving forward. So 2025 is going to be a major year for us as a nation because it's about the future of our country. And where do we go? Who are we? What are the values and principles that we embrace? And what are those things that we're going to fight for and coalesce around as Americans as a whole, even as we have the browning of our country?
Gotcha. I'm going to take one call before we shift gears here and bring Booker T on. Steve is calling us from Suffolk. Steve, thank you for calling Another View.
Yeah, hi. How y'all doing?
Well, good.
So I have to say that this has been I just happened upon this conversation while I was heading back to the office, and y'all are making me late. It's a great conversation. I love everything that Dr. Claville is saying. He mentioned something about messaging that sort of resonated with me, some thought that's been rolling around in my head a lot when I hear that. Because I heard the other day a Republican strategist, and I won't tell you what my persuasion is, but say we need to be better at messaging. And I thought to myself, every time I hear anybody say that, I'm like, the best message is results. Because the people you're trying to reach will know what you are doing if you're doing it correctly or you're accomplishing things. And so just saying things as opposed to getting things done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you for calling and sharing. We appreciate that.
Hey, Steve, thank you so much for calling, and sorry we made you late. But again, it's always great to have great supporters of WHRO, WHRV, and Another View with Barbara Hamley. To your point, results speak. You're exactly right. But one thing about the DMs is they get results. They get a lot of good results from a lot of policy that they pass, but they're just not good at telling the public about it because a lot of it is, legislative nuances, and a lot of it is kind of heavy public policy. And in the day of Instagram, how many seconds do you have to to really communicate, that type of information? So messaging is very, very important in getting out what you have done successfully. A lot of us are guilty of that. We do a lot of great things on a daily basis. I mean, if you're out there making it happen, you're working, you're taking care of your families and so forth, it's something that you do every day. But how many people really know the struggles that you go through and the things that the hurdles you jump over to make that happen? So, again, thanks again for your call, and we'll look and see who has the better messaging. The real messaging, not the artificial intelligence by China.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that call. Eric, thank you for being a part of today's show. Always such great insight, always something to take back and think about, and I really and truly appreciate this. Our next guest is somebody you know.
Yes.
Because you've recently had him on your show. Or is he already? Okay,
yeah.
All right. Booker T. Mattison, how are you?
Hello. So happy to be on, and so happy to have my dear friend, Dr. Claville, on as well.
Wonderful. Before we get going into our conversation, I want our listeners to hear a clip from the movie. I mean, it's just, go ahead, Jordan, just let us hear about, this.
Welcome to this Yo session. I'm Dr. Yolanda Carver, but you all can call me Dr. Yo. It's time for your relationships to grow. I want to give away my relationship services to one lucky couple. This is something new. Some would even say unorthodox. It's my job to help you get better. I can get you a prescription. Are you okay? You've noticed strange things, haven't you?
I thought I seen somebody outside. There ain't nobody out here.
Get comfortable. Feel the texture of her body. Like this.
I don't want to do counseling no more. Sorry.
You chose the difficult path. What she just did to you, she used to do to me.
That boy be what? Dr. Yo trying to set me up.
Do you love me? You're an emotional predator. So are y'all ready to start restoring these relationships?
Booker T, I shared this clip with several friends of mine, and everybody had the same reaction. I cannot wait to see this movie. Twisted Marriage Therapist drops today. What inspired you to write this story about a psychotherapist?
When people ask me that, and even as I was making the film, I was, saying to myself, what are my friends and colleagues going to think? They're going to like, wait a minute, that came out of Booker, why? So my response has been this, and I'm sticking by it, that, I consider myself to be a student of the human condition. And as a result, I'm well acquainted with human nature, and I have an active imagination. So, the assignment, I'm a hired gun, a hired writer, director. The assignment was to create a psychological thriller. And, that's what I did based upon my understanding and exaggeration of real life and drama.
See, that was my next question. Were any of the characters based on real life people?
That's actually a really good question. And here's something that I, tell my students. I teach directing and screenwriting at the University of Georgia. And I tell my screenwriting students that every one of your characters should have aspects of you within them, because that's what makes them human. Here's something else that I also tell them, that you should love every single one of your characters. And I prohibit them from judging their characters, saying good guy, bad guy, because when you love all of your characters equally, though they may do bad things, that doesn't make them a bad character, because that's how you're able to create characters that are well-rounded and believable, even when they do extraordinary or heinous things.
Wow. Okay. Now, when you're writing a screenplay or a book, and you're casting actors, are you casting actors, I guess I should say, in your mind,
yes.
like, who I should play this?
Oh, as I'm writing.
Right, right.
In some instances, yes, but most often, no, because one of the first things that I do when I'm preparing to write is I have to know this character, because I can't write a character well that I don't know well, and I certainly can't direct a character well that I don't know well. So most often the answer is no, but in some instances, yes, I have written a role for a particular actor, which can be fun on the one hand, but on the other hand, because when you're working with a network, it's not entirely up to you. The network does have final say on who you cast, and there's also the issue of an actor's availability or the budget's ability to afford them. So, yeah, in those instances where, I do kind of zero in on a person to write, you do that knowing that, you may or may not get that person depending on how things shake out once you start to shoot.
Okay. Now, is this an exclusive deal with Tubi, Mar Vista?
Yes. Yeah, it's a Tubi original movie, and, the streamers, they do these original movies as a way to generate viewers. So, Apple has Apple originals, Netflix originals, Amazon, you name it. So in addition to licensing content, which all of the streamers do, they also create these originals that you can only see on their streaming service, and that's their way of growing the number of viewers that they have.
So which do you enjoy more, writing or directing?
At one point in my career, I would say, that's a tough question, but the question is no longer tough. I enjoy directing more, and let me qualify this by saying that everything that I direct, I write. So it's not like I'm going to be out here directing something that I didn't write. I mean, maybe I'll come across a script that I like to direct, but they go hand in hand for me. But directing is so much easier. Not that it's easy, but it's so much easier than writing. Writing is extraordinarily difficult, and writing well is even more difficult.
I got you. Now, if you have some questions for this amazingly talented filmmaker and writer, please give us a call at 1-800-940-26... Wait a minute. Hold up. I'm giving you a pledge number. 1-800-940-2240 or 757-440-2665. Ooh, my mind. Okay, here we go. So, have you worked on projects with students? Because you're a teacher, you're an educator, you're a professor, or, former or current students. Have you worked with them on any projects?
That's also a great question, and the irony being my last two projects, The Sound of Christmas, which came out last Thanksgiving, that was a BET Plus original
Which
film.
was very good. I saw that one.
Oh, great. I'm glad you liked it, and I'm glad you watched it and enjoyed it. And with this one, Twisted Marriage Therapist, they were the first two that I didn't have current or former students, and it was for different reasons. In the case of The Sound of Christmas, that film, we shot it in March of 2022. So that was during the spring semester, and we shot it in Atlanta, and the University of Georgia is in Athens, Georgia, which is about an hour and a half away. So in that case, no, because it was during the semester, I wasn't able to create opportunities for students to be on the set. And then in the case of Twisted Marriage Therapist, I was thinking, okay, great, we're shooting this one in Atlanta, and we're shooting during the summer, so absolutely, as I always do, I'll be able to have, current or former students. But lo and behold, we shot in Little Rock, Arkansas. So for these last two, the answer is no, but for all of the other projects prior to that, I always had current or former students, because it enables me, one, to create opportunities for my students, and oftentimes it's their first paid gig. And two, it's one thing to teach students within the four walls how to create content. It's another thing for them to partner with you, and then they're in the process of helping you to also create that content. So that's typically the way it goes, and I hope that for my next one, I will be able to resort back to my pattern of having current or former students work on the crew.
How do you wind up in different locations? You said Arkansas. You were thinking Atlanta. You wound up in Arkansas. How does that happen? What's the process for you to go from one location like that to another?
So the Los Angeles-based producers for Twisted Marriage Therapist, Rick Benatar and Nigel Thomas, who did a great job, it was their decision to shoot in Little Rock. They had made 9 films in Arkansas. It was my first time going to Arkansas. So Arkansas was home for a month. We shot May 14th through June 2nd, and I was there from May 2nd to June 2nd because we had to do prep and location scouting and the like. So they had made 9 movies in Arkansas using this really wonderful crew that I also used. Dave Calhoun was the cinematographer. Sarah Nichols was the costume designer. Laura Hickey Krause was the production designer. So an Arkansas-based crew, and when you see the movie, it's beautifully done. So the crew, they did an extraordinary job. They moved fast. So that was a decision made by the producers, and I hadn't worked with any of this crew before. But, when you're a hired writer-director, of course you like to work with people that you worked with before, but, you're not hired to work with people you've worked with before. You're hired to deliver a quality film, and I think that's what we did with Twisted Marriage Therapist.
Now, is Arkansas the new Georgia for movies? What's...
No, because Georgia is still number 3, in the world for, film and TV production. Of course, LA is number 1, New York being number 2, and Georgia's number 3. Arkansas, hey, I enjoyed shooting there. I had a great experience, but, they don't have the amount of infrastructure that we have in the way of equipment houses and sound stages. So, it'll be a long time before they come for Georgia. I mean, I think places like New Mexico, and even New Jersey and New York have done things with their tax incentive to kind of wrestle some of the business away from the state of Georgia. But we're pretty secure with what we're doing in Georgia, and I think we're going to continue to be a powerhouse moving forward.
Nice. How long was the writing process for this movie?
So I started Twisted Marriage Therapist last August, and it started with an outline, and we did 3 drafts. I wrote 3 drafts of the outline. And then at that point, Tubi paused the project because they wanted to ensure that how we were treating mental illness was something that was appropriate in the story. So it was paused for maybe 2 months. I thought the project was dead. And then in November of last year, right around the time that the trailer for The Sound of Christmas came out, believe it or not, is when we kickstarted the process. And I started writing again. And I did 2 additional drafts of the outline. I started drafting the script itself in January, and the final polish I did was in late April, and then we were shooting at the beginning of May. So this was a year of my life. I think it's very much worth it. I'm excited about what it is. I've already started to get comments from people because, believe it or not, Tubi released it early last night around 7 or 8 o'clock. I got a note from a friend, hey, the movie's available now, and she was watching it. So it is available. It's live now. So please check it out on Tubi, which is free and doesn't require a subscription.
You are so talented and you come up with some really good stuff, honestly. And I'm wondering, have you ever suffered from writer's block? And if you did, how'd you come over it or get over it?
I want to thank you for asking that question because it gives me an opportunity to say what I say to my screenwriting students, that writer's block is a myth, and that may be controversial to some, but let me explain why I say that writer's block is a myth, because there are so many things that can be done to get beyond what I call the dilemma of the blank page, which is one of the most terrifying places that you can be. One way that I get over, quote, writer's block or the dilemma of the blank page is automatic writing exercises, which if you've taken any writing class, the instructors put you on the clock and you just start writing. And even if you don't know what to write, you type that. I don't know what to write. You probably type that sentence twice before ideas will start to flow, because we always have something to say. We always have something to write. Typically what prevents us from doing that is what I call writerly arrogance, this notion that it has to be perfect and I can't put it down until it's the best thing ever. But here's something else. Good writing, you don't actually do good writing. I say that good screenplays aren't written, they're actually built, because it's not about writing, it's about rewriting. So it doesn't matter what you do for that first or early draft. The key thing is to get things down, because the way that creativity works is the bad idea has to come, because it's only once you have the bad idea that your mind will be inspired by something else that the bad idea kicked off, and then the good idea or the better idea can come from that.
Yeah, I've heard something similar before. We had Shonda Tate Billingsley on.
Oh yeah, she's a good friend.
Yeah, and she and I was at the time working on a book, and I was like, can't get through this, and she was like, she said, good books aren't written, they're rewritten. So I have that now as a big poster for different things that I'm working on. Now, your last movie was shot in 12 days.
Yeah, this one was shot in 14 days, Twisted Marriage Therapist, and The Sound of Christmas, believe it or not, was shot in 12 days, and we had 12 music cues. It was a musical. So, yeah, both were tight schedules. Twisted Marriage Therapist, we had 1 camera, whereas with The Sound of Christmas, we had 2. So that was a major concern of mine going into Twisted Marriage Therapist. I just assumed, hey, we'll have 2 cameras. But, that's an expense. So we had one camera, but the crew, my goodness, they all work together. So they work really well together. It's almost like an episodic television crew. And they work so well and so fast that even with one camera, we were rarely behind. And if we were, in the few times that we did get behind, we were able to come up with a plan to ensure that we got what we needed to make a strong film.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question now that's kind of like picking your favorite child. But if you could pick one hat, writer, producer, director, teacher, which one would it be?
I would say director, and the reason is similar to why when you asked if I'm more comfortable or which one do I enjoy more, writing or directing, I would say directing, because once you have a good script, and that's a huge assumption. When you have a good script, it's very hard to make a bad movie. It's very hard. But if you have a bad script, it's almost impossible to make a good movie. So my assumption is that I have a good script, whether I wrote it or not, and I'm directing, because that's whenever the rubber meets the road. It's no longer imagination and words on a page. You're actually, communicating with your crew, bringing this to life with talented actors, and creating something that an audience can make an emotional investment in.
Okay. We only have about 2 minutes left, but what's your best advice for budding young filmmakers?
Do. You'd be surprised the number of people who, reach out to me saying that they want to do this, but they're not doing it. There's nothing, technology is such that there's nothing preventing someone who says that they're interested, because writing is free. You don't need anything to write. Even if you don't have a computer, you can get paper and pencil. So if you want to write. If you want to shoot, you don't need, lights and equipment. You can use the 4K phone that you have in your pocket that you're likely on TikTok or Instagram. So my advice is simply do. And the more you do, the better you'll get at doing it.
Wonderful. Now I want you to take this last minute that we have and tell us what's working, what's in the works, what you're working on, and anything else you want us to know about the movie before we go.
Sure. Well, Twisted Marriage Therapist is the story of a celebrity marriage counselor who gets the husband of a couple she's counseling committed so she can steal his wife. It's a psychological thriller that I wrote and directed. It is live now on Tubi, which is free and does not require a subscription. And I'm just beginning the process of starting to write my next film, which will also be a thriller. I'm still tightening and working on the storyline. The hope is that we'll be able to shoot in the spring, but of course that's predicated on the strikes coming to an end. So I'm just beginning the process of my next thriller, and I hope that you'll have me on for this next movie whenever it
Absolutely.
comes out.
You let me know when it's about to drop, and we will definitely make that happen. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I always learn something when I'm talking to you. I'm taking notes as you're talking, so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
But
Hope you're having a good
on.
semester with your classes and your students.
I am. I'm enjoying it, and I appreciate it. And behold the green and gold.
Oh, behold. Perfect. Did you hear that, Eric Claville? He said, behold the green and gold. All right. That just made my day. Well, thank you so much again. We hope you have enjoyed today's show. Now, if you did, please share it with a friend or a family member. You can go to anotherviewradio.org and download the podcast. Please take a minute to sign up for our eView newsletter, a once-a-week reminder of our upcoming shows. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Thank you so much to Dr. Barry Graham for filling in for me. Jordan Christie is our audio engineer, and Danielle Saunders answered our phones. I'm Lisa Godley. Barbara will be back next week. Thanks so much for listening, and let's get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.